What's going on, everyone? Dots here, and today I'm bringing you guys a beginner guide to your optimizations for tier 1 node wars. So tier 1 node wars are going to be the primary form of PvP in BDO that beginners do interact with, simply due to the fact that it is a form of capped PvP, which means that certain things such as your AP, your DP, your health, etc. have caps on them, allowing newer to intermediate players to be able to compete on a much more even footing with end game players. However, in the past, whenever I've played T1 node wars, I've just kind of took whatever gear I was wearing, jumped into node wars and had a good time and then moved on. But this time around, I'm playing BDO much more. I'm taking it much more seriously, and so I wanted to make sure my character was as optimized for this capped PvP as possible. And there are a ton of things that you can do to basically get damage outside of the AP caps. That's the main thing we're looking for, is squeezing out extra damage. You can also squeeze out extra stats in other areas due to the fact that, again, we have these big caps on the AP and DP. So if you have items that you don't really need for padding your stats, you can get other things from them. So I'm going to show you guys today what items, what buffs, and what add-ons you're going to want to look to run on your character when you're going into tier 1 node wars, to make sure that you are dealing as much damage and as tanky as physically possible. Now, speaking of the caps that I was talking about earlier, you can check your node war caps by going to the map, going to the top right, and clicking node war information. Now, we're talking about T1 node war, so you have T1 beginner and T1 intermediate. So double check what type of node you're dropping on, because those have slightly different caps. But if we look at the T1 node war beginner here, I'm in my regular gear, not my T1 gear, so I'm going to be below. Certain caps are going to be a little messed up. But as you can see, we have caps for things like AP, evasion, damage reduction, accuracy, resistances, special evasion, etc. So making sure that you hit as many of these caps as possible is going to be optimal for making sure that you are as tanky as possible and dealing as much damage as possible. Now, something to keep in mind is that these T1 caps are not just sheet stats. They include all of your hidden stats, such as AP brackets, DP brackets, human damage, like all these other things play into your caps. So because of that, you end up having, especially if you're just coming out of the season full Pen to Vala, maybe you just started into the guaranteed boss system, odds are you are way over the caps for a lot of different things. So we're able to take off some gear that is giving us stats that are essentially being cut off by the caps to basically get damage outside of these capped stats. So it'll make more sense when I go over the gear. But basically, I would say the stats here that I would worry about the least are going to be accuracy rate limit and evasion rate limit. Typically, odds are if you're in a T1 node war, you're not overly worried about evasion rate right now. Also, evasion rate and accuracy rate can be increased through buffs in your character when you're actively PvPing. So I wouldn't worry about those too much right now, but all of the other ones, you're going to want to make sure that you actually focus on hitting. Now, one thing that did confuse me when I was looking at the T1 node war caps, and I want to just discuss really quick, is the resistance limits. Okay, so you see resistance limit 20%, and then all these numbers underneath it, right? So those are actually your crowd control resistances. Okay, so if you look here, we got stun, stiffness, freezing 35, grapple 25, knockdown and bounce 75, knockback and floating 25. Okay, so those are the resistances that you see under here when you look at the all resistance limit, and you want to make sure you are hitting those numbers for when you go into node wars to make sure that you take as little CC as possible. So we're going to want to keep these limits in mind when we are actually building our character and looking into gear, buffs, and add-ons. Now, as you guys were able to tell, the cap for T1 node wars, even if we just look at the beginner node, is only 238, and my AP is 507 and 460. So that's 507 succession, 460 awakening, and so we are well over the cap. And so because of that, we're able to sacrifice primarily accessories, which are typically where your offensive prowess comes from outside of your weapons, and we are able to gain stats that allow us to deal damage outside of the AP caps. So if you look down here, there's going to be some items that we look to actually grab. So I'll just leave them in the bank, but we'll take a look. So number 1 is going to be the Chimera Pupil Gem. This is going to be an earring that you can purchase from Mandolph. He's the armor vendor in Trent. And if you guys look here, it only gives us 3 AP, which again doesn't really matter because we're well over the AP cap. But the big thing is the item effect. It gives you 10% down attack damage, extra damage on your down attack. So if people are knocked down, you're going to deal 10% more damage to them. And there were no caps on down attack damage. So by sacrificing AP that's essentially doing nothing for the Chimera Pupil Gem, we are able to get literally just 10% more damage that is, would otherwise be wasted. And because you can wear 2 of these, you're gaining a ton of extra down attack damage from these 2 earrings. We can do a similar thing with our necklace, right? So now this is 10% back attack damage. So if you look at my Cap Potion necklace, this is 30 AP. If I take this off, I'm still going to be over cap. It's again not really doing anything for us here. I'll still be over accuracy cap as well. So again, these stats, which are essentially doing nothing for me when I go into PvP, I can into tier 1 node wars, I can instead turn that into back attack damage, which isn't going to get chomped down by any sort of caps because there's no caps on this stat. And so we are able to get 10% extra damage. Similarly to the Kaya necklace and the Chimera Pupils, by the way, the Kaya necklace could also be purchased from Mandolph in Trent. Another thing that you can do is the ultimate Rosar sub weapon. This is another really big thing that you can do on your character for the exact same reason with the Chimera necklace or the Chimera earrings and the Kaya necklace, right? Even if I put this on 2, I'm still going to be well over the AP cap. And so, again, this is just another way to gain additional stats. Because if you look at the additional effect and the set effect, you end up getting all special attack extra damage plus 10%. And ignore all resistances plus 10%. This is just a way for you to get, again, additional percent damage increases that are uncapped in T1 Node Wars, and you're sacrificing capped stats to get those. Now, making sure that you ultimate your Rosar sub-weapon is very important. So what you're going to want to do when you actually purchase your sub-weapon, you're going to want to get the sub-weapon of your choice. So, for example, if I'm playing on Alon, you would get your Rosar Noble Sword or just your Rosar whatever. I recommend duo or tri, and then you're going to want to get a ultimate weapon reform stone, slap that into this, and then you will get that extra special attack damage. Because if you look, the Rosar at a base only gives you the all resistance ignoring, but when you actually ultimate it, you then get the special attack damage, which is huge. That's like crits, down attacks, back attacks, everything. So it's a lot more damage. So these are going to be very important. Now, if your stats are well over the T1 Node War caps and you can afford to also sacrifice your rings for some extra stats, I highly recommend grabbing red coral rings. The reason is that this gives you an additional 50 stamina. So for me, my Cap Potion ring is not really doing anything for me stat wise. Again, I'm well over the AP and accuracy cap, so I can just take this off and again slap on the red coral ring and get additional stamina. So as you guys can see, the whole concept behind wearing this these weird gear that would normally not have any purpose is that you're sacrificing stats that are being basically not utilized due to the caps, and you are then replacing it with percent increases, or in this case like stamina increases that are not being capped. So it's just a way for you to get damage outside of the capped values. Now, another thing that you're going to want to do, and I recommend for people, is that if you by any chance have an extra chest piece, I highly recommend grabbing an extra chest if you can. Dim tree is going to be my recommendation. If you have just, like a duo or tri dim tree. The reason that I mention that is because special evasion is going to be your best crystal for when you are playing out in the world in PvP, because special evasion rate is extremely strong, but special evasion is capped at a whopping 0% in tier 1 node wars. And so these special evasion crystals that I have in my red nose are doing nothing in tier 1 node wars. So instead, I have an extra suppressed dim tree from like 2 years ago that I slapped some HP gems into, and now whenever I throw on my dim tree chest, I'm gaining 500 health from wearing this to help me again get closer to the T1 node war health cap. So Using something like an extra chest piece is also going to be very valuable as well. So I mentioned that the Kaya necklace and the Chimera pupil gems can be purchased from Mandolph and Trent. The ultimate Rosar weapons, like I said, are just purchased off of the marketplace by getting the Rosar weapon and the Reform Stone. You also can get red coral rings off of the marketplace, and then obviously you can get any sort of dim tree armor or just another just standard chest piece that gives, you know, I recommend health. Or if you're well over the health caps, then in that case you can just grab any chest to slap some gems into. I just recommend any chest to be able to get different gem slots that don't basically so you don't have to constantly rip the gems out of your main chest piece, you know what I'm saying? So an extra chest piece is going to be valuable. I just like dim tree for the extra HP, and because it works with the rest of my monster set gear. So something like that's going to be good, and again, that could be purchased off the MP. Another thing that I would recommend doing if you are under certain caps is using your artifacts and your light stones as well as your gems to make sure that you hit those caps. So for example, in my normal gear, I don't really build any evasion because I'm well under the evasion cap, because I'm, you know, I'm a Nova going to DR mainly. But for tier 1 node wars, to make sure that I get to the evasion cap, I actually do run a set bonus here: max HP, all damage reduction, all evasion, and grapple resistance. But the main reason I run the set bonus that these 4 light stones create is because, number 1, the extra HP helps me get to the HP cap in T1 node wars. But the second thing is that with the set bonus that I get from the evasion and the plus the evasion from this crystal, I end up hitting the regular evasion cap. So it just makes me that much tankier in tier 1 node wars. Now, when I was talking about crystals before, personally, the ones that I personally run for my gear is I run RBF Harfias in my helmet. I run the Bond Magic Crystal Cobelinus in my chest, and the reason that I run those is because they give you 150 HP. That's the most HP you can get off a crystal, so I believe. So massive HP bonus. I run Bond Vipers. You could also run Jin Vipers here as well if you have the money for that, and then RBF Adamantines for a big boost to my resistances. And so again, you might need to change up the crystals ever so slightly if you know you're way above certain caps or way below certain caps. But basically, look into your, again, artifacts, light stones, and your gear and weapon crystals to make sure that you are hitting the various caps for tier 1 node wars. In terms of offensive crystals, I personally highly recommend crystals of Elcar and your main weapon. It's a whole lot of damage in terms of the accuracy, and you also ignore the CC resistances. And then I also recommend, if you're in your offhand, going with corrupted magic crystals, because again, this just gives 10% crit hit damage. It's extremely strong. If, you know, again, you can't afford these or you don't want to take the DR loss, you can also just run the regular blue quality ones. They are just called Magic Crystal of Infinity Critical Hit, which will also give you that 10% critical hit damage, which is extremely strong in tier 1 node wars. Now, there's a list of buffs that I would recommend and just things that I recommend having on you when you go into T1 node wars. In terms of your buff food, I'm going to highly recommend the Exquisite Cron Meal. It just gives you the best spread of offensive stats for PvP. In terms of your drought, I recommend looking into the Giant Drought for a very similar reason. Best offensive stat spread for PvP from a drought. Also, the big thing too is like the movement speed, the critical hit, the stamina, the extra special attack damage are extremely valuable in tier 1 node wars. So Giant Drought's going to be very good. Obviously, you want to make sure to have plenty of health and mana potions on you whenever you go into PvP. I would also recommend having a ton of HP pots. You burn through these when you fight in node wars. Have extra in your MP as well in case you do run out. You could always grab some from your maid or your butler. I also recommend looking into getting whale tendon potions. Whale tendon potions are something I just started using recently, and they're absolutely amazing. You can get the green quality ones off of the marketplace or from the war vendor with your seals here. If you look, these seals, you could actually go talk to the war vendor. I think it's these ones, the shining metals. You can actually go to the military supply vendor and exchange these for whale tendon pots. So if you do need some, you can grab them that way. But these are a really good potion to use because when you're crowd controlled, they're also 45% more effective, and they're on a different cooldown from the regular HP and mana potions. So it's just a way for you to get extra HP restoration and make yourself that much tankier while you're fighting. There's also a blue quality potion, which is a little bit better, but you know, for most people, I would say that the green ones will be fine. But if you're looking to super min max, place a bunch of pre-orders for the blue quality ones. Also, the green ones are the ones that are actually available from the vendor. Now, outside of the potions, I would also recommend getting your villa buff. You could actually take a ride out to a villa over here and grab the buff, or you can get the pass from here, which will allow you to get it from your tent for a week. Or if you have the Book of the Old Moon, you can get it from your tent as well. You're gonna want to get the body enhancement one for 3 hours, so it will last you the entire duration of the Node War. In addition, I would also recommend getting your church buffs. So if you go to, let me run to my horse here. If you grab 6 10G bars from the banker and come to the church over here, you could also, you know, go to the church in Valia if you're there, but generally I recommend Heidel for your Node War hub. So then if you come here, run in here and talk to this guy, talk to Arzen, you can exchange for attack and protection, which will just give you extra buffs offensively and defensively for the Node War that will last 2 hours. Also, obviously recommend that you have your Alchemy Stone. If you have Vel's Heart, obviously use that. If you don't have Vel's Heart like me, use the Destruction Spirit Stone. It's going to be your best option for your Alchemy Stone. Make sure that you do obviously turn that on. Now, we got 2 more things. Number 1 is going to be our house buffs. So I would recommend, again, having some sort of residence in Heidel. And when you come over here to your house, you can come inside and you can actually place objects inside of your house that give you buffs. So what I recommend for most people, especially if you're following this guide, your health should be capped out with your gems that I recommended earlier. You should be well over the caps for most things. So what I would recommend doing is actually boosting your stamina. So you're going to want to interact with this Calx Wings if this actually like wants to work. Here we go. So by using this, you will get 200 additional stamina, which is extremely helpful for Node Wars because you're trying to move around a lot. And obviously for a lot of classes, your movement abilities cost stamina. So having the extra stamina from this is going to be extremely useful. So I do recommend grabbing that and putting a bunch in your house and then using those pre-war. Again, that buff does last 2 hours. Now, the final thing that you're going to want to do, and you're going to want to do this as close to war as humanly possible, because this buff only lasts for 30 minutes, is that you are going to want to get your Carolyn buff. So Carolyn is an NPC that you can find over here. If I can get off my horse and not interact with the random items out in the world, you're going to want to go talk to Carolyn, who can be found over here. And she will give you a crit buff that will allow you to deal extra critical damage. So you're going to chat with Carolyn and get Carolyn's kindness for 25 energy. Now, if you do not have this available, it is because your amity with Carolyn is not high enough. So what you want to do to actually raise your amity with Carolyn is just walk up to her and press F5 about 20 gabillion times and just continually wave at her, and it will raise your amity until it is high enough for you to interact with to get her buff. I'm not sure the exact value off the top of my head. I mean, my amity with her was 55 and I had access to the buff, but I mean, literally you can skyrocket your amity super quickly by just standing in front of her and waving. So it won't be a problem. You just got to actually wave at her and you will be able to get your buff. Now, the final thing is going to be add-ons for your skills. So what you're going to want to do for T1 Node Wars is you are going to want to avoid flat stats. So things like this DP minus 15, extra damage to human plus 10. You're going to want to avoid these for T1 Node Wars. And the reason for that is because, again, our stats are capped. So if you're getting 10 extra human damage, well, your AP is already capped, so this does nothing. And then odds are most players that you're fighting are well over the DP cap. So it's not like this 15 gets subtracted out of their capped DP. It gets subtracted out of their uncapped DP. So this is, again, going to essentially do nothing. What you want to focus on is things like bleeding, like I have right here, accuracy and evasion rate if you need to kind of increase those, crit hit damage, down attack damage, crit hit rate, attack speed, casting speed. Things like that are going to be your friend when it comes to T1 Node Wars and are going to give you the biggest increases to your damage. But guys, I do think with that being said, that is going to be it for me in today's video. I hope that you found this helpful and you learned something from it. If you did, I'd really appreciate if you left a like on it. If you have any questions about optimizing your character for T1 Node Wars, please feel free to leave a comment below and I will help you out as soon as I can. And also feel free to let me know if you found this guide helpful and if you did learn something from it. And if you guys want more BDO beginner guides, I'd appreciate if you hit that sub button as well as the bell to keep those notifications on. So thank you all so much for stopping by today, guys. I do very much appreciate it. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all in the next video.